Okay, so this video is about area and perimeter, and so we're going to take what we've learned so far and just kind of use it in an application in a geometry setting. So you've probably heard of perimeter before. When we're dealing with perimeter, it is basically the sum of the lengths of the sides of a shape. So as an example, if I were to just pull up my my rectangle tool, okay, and take a look at this, if I were to measure the sides of this and I had edges of 3, 4, and if this is a rectangle, the opposite side would also be 3, and the opposite side from 4 would also be 4, then I would just simply be adding up all of these sides. So I would say 3 plus 4 is 7, 7 plus 3 is 10, 10 plus 3 is 14. And so I would look at this and say that the lengths of, that the perimeter of this shape is 14 units long. Okay? So in real life situations, when you're presented with a word problem, or if you're actually doing something out in real life, this is going to be used when you hear keywords like the border of a room or the edge of a shape, right? Anything along those lines when we're trying to describe the outside. So if we're doing fencing, right, we're fencing in a yard, right, or if we're putting trim around the outside edge of a room, you know, if we're painting or something like that, this would be cases where we would use perimeter. Okay, so we're going to look at a word problem and we're going to answer some questions, right, and see if we can apply this. Okay. So in our example here, they're saying we have a rectangular room that has dimensions of 14 feet and 12 feet. So you should know again that a rectangle, the opposite sides are equal to each other. So I would highly recommend, just to make sure that you're seeing what it is that they're describing, that if there's no picture given, which there isn't in this case, that we should draw it. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle, okay, and I'm going to label it. And so they say that the dimensions are 14 feet and 12 feet, okay, and so I'm going to label those and know that when they say 14 and 12, that the opposite sides are also 14 and 12. So I'm going to say this is 14 feet long and 12 feet wide, and that means that the opposite sides are also 14 and 12. Okay, and the label on this is actually feet, so I'll place those on here as well. Okay, so 14 feet and 12 feet are now on my picture, and it's just asking me in this case what is the perimeter of the room. So what that means is I'm just going to come over to the side and say this is 14 plus 12 plus 14 plus 12. Okay, and so not equals 0. Let me get rid of that. Okay, 14 plus 12, and I would like to know what this equals. Okay, so I'm going to stack these up because when we add together add together whole numbers, we can just add down the place value column. So I'm going to put them in order, right? So when we add, order doesn't matter, so I'm allowed to do this. There's two 14s and two 12s. So if I do this, it's 4 plus 4, which is 8, plus 2, which is 10, plus 2 more, which is 12. So if I add down the ones column, I get a 12, right? And so I'm going to place the 2 down here and put the 1 up top. And then I'm going to add, and it looks like I have 5 ones here, which would be 5. Okay, so I'm going to say that the perimeter of this room is 52 with the right label, feet long. Okay, so our label for perimeter is the same as the label for the length. So if it was 12 feet, my perimeter would also be in feet. So I would say their answer to this one, it is 52 feet long. Okay, so part B, let's take a look at what it says. It says if it costs $3 per foot to place these special tiles around the outside edge of the room, how much money will it cost? How much money will you need to tile the outside edge of the room? So we know that there are 52 feet, okay, and it is $3 for every foot. So you need to think about operations now. This is a little bit different. This is not just adding things together. Or it kind of is. What we're doing is we're saying it's $3 for the first tile, and it's $3 for the second tile, and it's $3 for the third tile, and $3. And we have 52 of those because we know that the perimeter is 52 feet, which means we need 52 tiles. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to say that 52 times 3 is the same as adding together 52. It's adding together $3 52 times. So I can use multiplication instead of having to add together the number 3 52 times. Okay? So if I multiply this, okay, $3 for each of these 52 feet, I'm going to say 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 5 is 15. And so I would say that the total cost to put these special tiles around the perimeter of the room is about is exactly $156. Okay, and so we're going to extend our problems. I think we're pretty good at dealing with perimeter, and we're going to do some application as well and see if we can make find the total cost of a project. So you'll see problems that look like this. Okay, so here's the second possible calculation that we might have to do, and that is area. So when we're measuring area, we're measuring the inside of a shape, and we're wondering how many 1 unit squares could we fit inside. Okay? So in my picture right here, if you're wondering what I mean by how many 1 unit squares, if I'm looking at this one, I would say that this room might be like, for example, 5 yards, okay, by 6 yards. Okay? So we did our calculation and we did the measurement, and it's 5 yards by 6 yards. Okay? Don't worry about this black border. I couldn't make that go away. Okay, so I measured 5 yards by 6 yards. So what they're actually showing you on this particular picture for this patio is that if I were to divide up this patio into 1 yard squares, okay, this would be 1 yard, this would be 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards. And then I would just count, right? If I were to go down, I would say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we split them into 1 by 1 squares. And if you were to count this, there's 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. We can fit 30 squares that are 1 yard by 1 yard. And that's what we mean when we say 30 square yards. Okay? So in this case, the way that we do it for a rectangle, okay, the rectangle formula, which again you should have seen before, is if we multiply together the length times the width, okay, I missed a letter, width, okay, that would give me the area. So in this case, 5 times 6, okay, and that's going to be 30. And so here's the label, right? My label over here is yards. Okay, my label for this is going to be yards squared, or you might see it written like this. It's the same thing. You might see it written as square yard. So instead of using the shorthand, they might actually write out the word square. And so what they're describing when they say 30 square yards is they're saying if you come over here and you divide up the inside of this space, you could actually fit 30 squares, 30 real squares that are 1 yard by 1 yard around. Okay, so that's what they mean when they say 30 square yards. But for our case, if they say what is the area of this patio, like if we were laying cement or something like that on this patio, we would say we would need 30 square yards of cement. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of that. Okay, so in this example, they say you decide you want to get new hardwood floors in your house, and the room that you want to put the hardwood floors in is 19 feet long by 22 feet wide. So again, this is a rectangle. So I'm going to draw myself a little rectangle. Okay, and they tell us that the rectangle is 19 feet by 22 feet. Okay? And so my formula for rectangles, and this is exclusive to rectangles, says multiply together the length times the width. So that's 22 times 19. So I'm going to just come off to the side here just to do the work and figure out what is 22 times 19. We're going to stack them vertically. Okay, this is multiplication. And so our rules for multiplication when we're multiplying said multiply the 9 by both of these digits and then multiply the 1 by both of these digits, but making sure that we line it up correctly. So 9 times 2 is 18, so there's the 8, carry the 1. 9 times 2 is again 18, plus 1 more makes it 19. Okay? So again, I was careful to make sure that everything lined up nicely. This is the tens place for my numbers that I'm multiplying, and the tens place also is right below that. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing with the 1. 1 times 2 is 2, but when I get that answer, I'm going to place it below the 1. It goes there, and then 1 times this 2 is also 2. Now I'm going to add, and this looks like 8. 9 and 2 is 11, carry a 1, and this looks like 4. Okay, so it looks like 418 is the answer, so let's come over here and say this is 418. My units were feet, and so I'm going to say feet squared, okay, or square feet. So this would be my final answer. If I wanted to lay hardwood, I would need to go to Home Depot or some hardware store and say, I need 418 square feet of space. That's the question they're going to ask. Okay, so if the hardwood costs $11 per square foot, how much money will I need to complete the project? So again, same idea. If each of these represents a square, okay, and it's $11 for each of those squares, I'm basically going to do my total area times the $11 per square foot. Okay, so this is another multiplication problem, and I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to do 1 times 8, okay, 1 times 1, 1 times 4, okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with this tens place 1, but again, drop it right below the tens place. So 1 times 8, 1 times 1, 1 times 4, and I'm going to add down the column. The 8 just comes down. This is 9, 5, and 4. So to place new hardwood in this room, it's going to cost me $4,598. Okay. Last problem, I just want to show you one triangle problem, and this has some extra labels on it. So this is asking for the area and the perimeter of the triangle. So let's start off with perimeter, because I think that one's a little bit more straightforward. So there are no formulas for perimeter. Perimeter is just add up all the sides. If it's got 3 sides, add up those 3 sides. If it's got 5, add up those 5. If it's got 4, like a rectangle or a square, add up those 4. So for us, we just have to make sure that the numbers that we're putting together are the outsides. If you notice, there's a lot more labels on here than just what we have. So if I were to say, I would say this is an outside edge, this is an outside edge, okay, and then the bottom is an outside edge, which means this 8 that's going through the middle of the shape is not going to be used in our calculation. So I'm going to say 10 plus 10 plus 12. Okay, 10 plus 10 plus 12. Okay, so 10 and 10 is 20, and another 12 is 32. And if you're unsure about that, you can stack them up and add down the columns. Okay, my label here is inches. Okay, and so it's inches. There's no squares or any special symbols. The measure of perimeter is the same as the measure of the sides themselves. Okay, so the same label. Okay, so there's my perimeter. Okay, and so here's the catch with area. Okay, so the area for a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. And you might remember this from geometry class. So let's talk about what the base and the height are. The base of a triangle can be any of the sides. Okay, but the height is going to be something that comes out of the middle of that, okay, and goes to the opposite side. So it goes through the shape. So I'm talking about base and height here, okay? I'm going to say, well, I could have used like these 10s, but I don't have like a line coming out of those and going to the opposite side, but I do for this bottom one, so that's the one I'm going to use. I'm going to use this as the base. I choose that, and I'm choosing this one because I do have a line that's coming out of this and going to the opposite side, so that's what these are the numbers I'm going to use. This is my B, okay, which I can't use with my highlighter, okay? My B and my H. Okay, so I'm going to plug those values in. Okay, so if you don't remember from geometry, okay, these are the values we need to use: 12 and 8. Okay, so we haven't done a lot with fractions, but we'll be able to handle a 1/2. Okay, so 12 times 8. Okay, if you remember your multiplication facts, is 96. Okay, and then I'm going to multiply that times. I still haven't done anything with this half yet, so I need to take half of 96. Okay, which I think you're just going to believe me right now is 48. Okay, which you might be able to do that. If you're not able to do that last step, we're going to do division shortly, and you will be able to do it. Oh, I forgot my label. Okay, 48, and I have a label here of inches. Okay, and I excuse me, I have a square inches on this. Okay, so the way that I multiplied these together, this is the last little point. The way that I multiplied these together is I decided to put together the 12 and the 8 first and get the 96, and then I weighted on the half. Right, so that's how I got to my 48. You can multiply things together in any way that you want. So it's entirely likely or possible and probably easier for you to say, I can do half times 12, or just say, what's a half of 12? And that's 6 times 8. And if you see, that's also the 48 that I ended up with down here. Or maybe you decided that you wanted to take the half and give it to the 8 instead, and so you did instead 12 times half of 8, which is 4, and if you notice, 12 times 4, also 48. So I put the 12 and the 8 together first, and that's probably the hardest way to do this, but you could have just given the half to either of the smaller numbers first, and that would have made probably the calculation a little easier. So when you're doing problems, if you come across any triangles, try to give that half to a nice small number that you know the answer to without having to do any special calculations.